Galactic Records Department prided itself on three proud pillars: absolute accuracy, meticulous organization, and an endless capacity for paperwork so dense that few beings would ever bother to read it. Tucked away in the Andromeda Galaxy, the department's headquarters was a building so unnecessarily large and labyrinthine that it often featured in comedic travel brochures about the most frustrating places to visit. Inside this architectural monstrosity, countless corridors twisted in circles, leading to thousands of offices and sub-offices. There were entire hallways lined with filing cabinets taller than the average spaceship, each one stuffed with documents waiting for rubber stamps of approval. In short, it was the epicenter of bureaucracy in a galaxy known for endless committees. Chief Analyst Zira, 99, Beta, who insisted everyone call her simply Zira, was a devoted child of this bureaucracy. She believed wholeheartedly in the power of properly filled-out forms and triple-check data sets. Zira's job, in theory, was simple: examine galactic disaster records, audit them for consistency, and flag anything that seemed out of place. She thrived on detail. Rumor had it that, during her training, she submitted an 800-page report on the correct shade of ink that should be used for atmospheric anomaly charts. This earned her quiet admiration from the older bureaucrats and open exasperation from the younger, less fanatic employees. Still, no one could question Zira's dedication to the department's mission of cataloging every single natural disaster in the known universe. One day, during the 100-year audit, a dreaded but necessary procedure that required every record in the system to be validated, Zira stumbled upon an anomaly that made her quadruple check the computer's logs. She was scanning through a standard list of star systems, cross-referencing planetary incidents like solar flares, massive earthquakes, unexpected asteroid collisions, and so on. Her six-fingered hand paused over an entry that read, Earth, Solar System 8271C. 0 entries found. She blinked. By all accepted galactic standards, 0 entries for an inhabited planet was unthinkable. Every planet had some level of tectonic instability, or storms, or cosmic debris occasionally smashing into its surface. To see absolutely nothing for thousands of years was akin to witnessing a star system spontaneously vanish from the sky. Zira ran a system diagnostic 3 times, each more thoroughly than the last. Each time, the main computer insisted Earth had no recorded natural disasters. 0. She stared at the projection. Earth was a blue-green planet, known for its volatile climate, swirling weather patterns, and a distinct tilt that allowed seasons to change. In a typical scenario, that alone should have yielded multiple storm events, floods, or atmospheric disruptions. Instead, she was faced with the biggest gap in the history of the department's data. If there was one thing the Galactic Records Department despised, it was incomplete files. If there was one thing Zira despised, it was the idea that the system might be wrong. Within a single galactic day, her discovery triggered a series of departmental alarms. An official anomaly memo soared up the chain of command, passing from Zira's immediate supervisor to the subcommittee for planetary anomalies, and from there to the Oversight Commission on Data Integrity. In a building where it typically took 3 months to get approval for new office chairs, the speed of this escalation was unprecedented. Meetings were convened in cramped conference rooms where officials in tailored suits that changed color with their moods, a popular custom among certain Andromedan species, argued over the meaning of no disasters. Some insisted it was an error, perhaps a 1,000-year-old mistake that had never been rectified. Others suggested more bizarre theories. Maybe Earth was under the permanent protection of a cosmic deity, or perhaps the planet itself was a holographic projection. No one could fathom a world that simply did not log a single natural catastrophe. Eventually, they agreed that the only way to resolve the question was to send a specialized team to Earth for an in-person assessment. This was a bold step for the department, which typically preferred to manage everything from afar using data transmissions. However, the notion of an entire planet evading the official definition of disaster was so egregious that an on-site inspection was deemed necessary. An expedition budget was approved, larger than some small star systems' annual resources, and a formal announcement declared that a group for clarifying the Earth anomaly would travel light years to uncover the truth. The formation of the team proved to be as laborious as everything else in the department. First, a subcommittee drew up a list of required skill sets: geology, meteorology, cultural interpretation, and general investigative prowess. Then another subcommittee debated the ethical implications of investigating a planet that had no immediate crisis. Finally, a third subcommittee considered the color of their identification badges, which led to a week-long debate over the official hue signifying special assignment. By the time the final decision was made, a bland shade of brownish green, the actual members of the team had already been chosen. Leading the expedition was Lorik, a methodical and unflappable investigator whose greatest asset, according to departmental lore, was his ability to fill out forms at record speed. He once completed Form M13 Alpha, a notoriously complicated document with over 400 sub-questions, in under an hour. This was the sort of bureaucratic stamina that impressed top officials. Serving under him were three specialists: Prax, Jin, and TYXX. Prax was a geological genius who had memorized data on every tectonic plate shift discovered in the galaxy and could identify 73 rock compositions by taste alone. Jin was the meteorological expert, known for having survived 3 Category 10 hyperstorms on a gas giant. Jin would happily discuss cloud formations and wind shear patterns for hours if left uninterrupted. TYXX was a cultural interpreter, bright-eyed and thoroughly trained in blending with primitive species, though no one was sure how TYXX would hide the neon stripes that danced along her skin whenever she became excited. They gathered for their first official briefing in a round auditorium lined with transparent data screens. Director Holler, a stern-faced being whose species resembled living gelatin, presided over the meeting. Holler's body quivered whenever he spoke with emphasis, which often caused comedic wobbles that belied the seriousness of his role. He reminded everyone that the mission was of utmost importance. Discovering the truth about Earth's missing disasters was a departmental priority that could not be postponed. The entire galaxy watched them with curiosity, or at least, that was the grand statement in the official memos. As soon as the meeting ended, TYXX asked the question on everyone's mind: how do we hide our presence from the humans? Cultural records indicated that humans could be surprisingly perceptive despite their relatively modest technology level. However, the department's intelligence also stated that humans had numerous countries, each with unique languages and customs. This labyrinth of cultures made infiltration both challenging and unexpectedly convenient. Lorik explained that they would pose as meteorological researchers from a place called Finland, a region humans believed to be so stoic and mundane that outsiders rarely asked many questions about it. If pressed, they would utter words such as sauna, Nokia, or Moomin, a strategy that apparently baffled most humans into polite silence. Thus prepared, the team boarded their vessel. The starship was far from the sleek, aerodynamic models used by the military. Instead, it was a bulky craft bristling with sensor arrays, labeled in large letters as property of Galactic Records Department. For camouflage on Earth, the department's outdated database suggested mimicking a silver weather balloon. This was an odd choice. Modern Earth had advanced beyond that as a standard for atmospheric research, but official protocols were seldom updated. So a gigantic, vaguely balloon-like shape was what Earth's inhabitants would see if they detected anything at all. It took several days of faster-than-light travel to arrive in the solar system, which gave Lorik and his crew ample time to finalize their approach. Prax reviewed the planet's geological profile, shaking her head in disbelief at how many active faults, volcanoes, and mountain-building processes occurred on Earth. In any other world, they would classify this entire planet as a single high-risk zone, she said. Jin pointed out the swirling weather systems visible even from orbit, each massive enough to spawn storms, cyclones, or hurricanes. TYXX was especially concerned about cultural norms. She studied the languages, gestures, and phenomena known as small talk, a concept that alien species found either baffling or pointless. By the time they neared Earth's upper atmosphere, they were all certain that no planet so unstable could possibly have zero disasters in the department's database. Their ship descended through clouds, adopting the illusion of a clunky weather balloon. A few passing planes might have seen an odd, reflective object, but nothing so alarming that it would override the typical earthly assumption that such things were either experimental balloons or illusions. Eventually, the ship set down on a secluded patch of coastal wetlands in a region humans called Florida. Based on department statistics, Florida was a hotspot for storms, floods, and an event known as hurricane season. If there was anywhere they would find a disaster, it would be here. The first shock came quickly. Upon arrival, the local news outlets were buzzing with a hurricane warning. According to the meteorological bulletins, a storm with considerable wind speeds was approaching. Jin practically rubbed his hands in excitement, anticipating widespread panic and emergency protocols that, in most galactic civilizations, would involve mass evacuations. Instead, as the team took up observation posts in a disguised facility near the coastline, they witnessed an inexplicable response. Locals boarded up windows, secured outdoor furniture, and then some of them organized something called a hurricane party. They gathered in groups, drank beverages containing ethanol, and joked about losing power. Lorik watched through a disguised drone feed, his eyes wide. They're celebrating? Prax's mouth fell open. To her, a hurricane this size was reason for immediate planet-wide warnings, the distribution of oxygen masks, or at least the building of reinforced shelters. Yet these humans spoke of the storm as though it were a mild inconvenience. On local television channels, reporters stood on beaches in raincoats, braving the rising winds to broadcast updates. Viewers apparently found this entertaining. The bigger the gusts, the more enthralled they became. Only a minority of residents evacuated. Others simply waited it out, trusting in certain building codes that, from the team's perspective, seemed woefully inadequate for the strength of the weather. When the storm finally struck, the winds roared, rain came down in sheets, and water surged into low-lying areas. Power lines went down, a few streets flooded, and some buildings lost shingles or sections of roofing. The next morning, the investigating team ventured out, expecting scenes of devastation. Instead, they found a community already halfway back to normal. People cleared fallen branches, moved debris, and discussed who lost electricity for how many hours. Some looked at the broadcast track of the storm and said, "We dodged a bullet this time. Could have been worse," or, "Well, it wasn't as bad as Hurricane so-and-so from a previous year." The casual references to earlier, more brutal storms baffled Lorik and his colleagues. How could they compare these events so calmly? Seeking more data, the crew traveled to another region of Earth known as Tornado Alley, a place where powerful atmospheric vortices regularly formed. This phenomenon was widely recognized across the galaxy as a catastrophic event. To the team's consternation, they found communities well adapted to the risk. Many homes had underground shelters, robust alarm systems, and the residents knew precisely what to do when a tornado warning sounded. Some of them even joked about it, stating, "It's not a matter of if, but when, we can rebuild if the tornado hits. No big deal." Prax nearly had a breakdown trying to understand how anyone could shrug off potential destruction like that. On more orderly planets, repeated hits of that magnitude would have led to mass emigration or relocations. Yet here, families passed stories about close calls in a tone resembling mild annoyance rather than existential horror. The puzzlement only grew in California, where the team expected to observe seismic disasters. Humans had established major cities right on top of active fault lines, where the ground could shift unexpectedly at any time. Prax's instruments registered numerous small quakes on a daily basis, any one of which might have rattled an off-world civilization. But the local people rarely blinked at a magnitude 4.0 or 5.0 quake. They laughed, saying, "Wake us up for the big one," or that was just a little shake. Jin found it terrifying to watch the ground sway beneath buildings. He practically kept the sensors running 24 hours a day in hopes of capturing what he assumed would be a catastrophic collapse. Instead, life continued as if a gently trembling Earth was entirely normal. Over the ensuing weeks, the crew fanned out, investigating floods, wildfires, and even volcanic activity in certain areas. They uncovered historical accounts of disasters that sounded horrifying in scale. Tsunamis wiping out shorelines, eruptions spewing ash into the sky, hurricanes that devastated entire regions. According to the official department definitions, these events should have been meticulously recorded as disasters. Yet from the perspective of Earth's inhabitants, these were just large-scale natural occurrences. They had coping methods, building codes, rescue operations, and subsequent rebuilding. The pattern was repeated over and over. The planet tried to disrupt human life, and the humans adapted. It was as if they had factored in chaos from day one. Their daily existence included the expectation that something might go wrong, so they adjusted plans accordingly. This led to near-constant arguments among the team. Jin insisted that each observed storm or quake qualified as a genuine natural disaster. Laura countered that the humans themselves did not categorize these phenomena as out of the ordinary. By the official definition from the Galactic Records Department, a natural disaster was an event that exceeded a civilization's baseline capacity for adaptation, causing severe disruption. The key phrase was exceeded baseline capacity. It gradually dawned on them that humanity's baseline capacity was simply far higher than that of most known civilizations. It was so high that events considered disastrous elsewhere were routine here. Prax grew obsessed with verifying Earth's geological features. She studied layers of sediment, ancient lava flows, and earthquake fault lines, expecting to find some sign that would prove Earth's data missing from the department's records was just a clerical oversight. But what she found only reinforced the notion that Earth had always been volatile. Humans, for whatever reason, had chosen to settle in every corner of it. Some chose coasts frequently battered by storms. Others chose low-lying floodplains. Still others built along the edges of volcanoes. Rather than avoid these hazards, they incorporated them into local culture, even turning them into tourist attractions in some cases. TYXX conducted discreet interviews with dozens of people. One conversation stuck in her mind. A middle-aged individual whose home had been flooded multiple times. Asked why they didn't move, the person replied that the soil was perfect for their crops, and the floods brought nutrient-rich silt. Besides, they added cheerfully, "It's always an adventure." In TYXX's mind, the word adventure was typically reserved for daring explorations of unknown star systems. Using it to describe the annual destruction of property was baffling yet fascinating. The more TYXX interviewed people, the clearer it became. Earth society had embedded these events into its cultural framework, complete with recovery rituals, stories of heroic rescue, and improvements in technology or infrastructure after each calamity. They were not in denial. They simply refused to call it an apocalypse every time. Meanwhile, Lorik observed how official emergency management structures functioned. Earth had local and national agencies issuing warnings and guidelines. They had volunteers and professionals responding to crises within hours. From an alien perspective, these protocols were surprisingly decentralized, yet they worked. Humans had adapted to Earth's unpredictability not by eliminating risks, but by accepting that these conditions were normal. The planet's strong storms, quakes, and floods were not an aberration. They were the default setting, so to speak. In that sense, Earth never exceeded its baseline capacity for adaptation. After nearly 2 months of immersive research, Lorik and the others held a tense meeting in their makeshift headquarters, disguised as a weather monitoring station. Jin was scrolling through pages of data about hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, and floods, each event correlated to property damage estimates. "These numbers are enormous," Jin said, still not comprehending the casual approach. "By all rights, they should have a dedicated disaster day every week." Prax nodded in agreement. We've seen structural collapses, floods that could submerge entire neighborhoods, and storms flinging debris at incredible velocities. TYXX pointed at a large chart pinned to the wall. But see how the humans talk about it. They name storms, compare them to prior storms, then measure how quickly they can rebuild. It's part of their system. Lorik took a deep breath, aware that he was about to articulate the uncomfortable truth. They don't classify these events as disasters in the sense that we do. And if they don't classify them, we never receive official entries. He tapped a finger on the department's official definition. We need to reevaluate how we apply this definition to them. The final piece of evidence arrived when a small earthquake rattled the area they were studying. Prax's instruments recorded it at around magnitude 4.2, enough to alarm the average cosmic citizen. Lorik rushed out to warn a cluster of humans standing nearby, only to discover that they laughed and said, "That was nothing. We'll let you know when the big one hits." It became undeniable that humans and the department had fundamentally different perspectives on what constituted a true disaster. The mission was never about whether Earth had catastrophes. It was about how humans perceived, adapted to, and named them. The department's records required an official classification of events as disasters, but humans rarely did so except in the most extreme, civilization-altering sense. Resolving this quandary meant returning to headquarters with a startling conclusion. Earth might be among the most unstable planets in the galaxy, yet it had no official disasters on file because humanity treated those events as part of normal life. Lorik prepared for the backlash this would cause back home. The department had existed for millennia, and their definitions had seldom been challenged. Changing or even questioning them would spark administrative chaos on a galactic scale. They reboarded their craft, floating back into the atmosphere in that ever-comical silver balloon disguise. The journey home gave them ample time to compile a comprehensive report, complete with audio and visual recordings of humans calmly discussing storms, rebuilding after quakes, and confidently predicting annual floods. TYXX appended a cultural analysis that showed how human literature and media often glamorize their dramatic environment, portraying survival and resilience as core values. Jin included thorough meteorological data illustrating that Earth was, by any standard scale, subject to unending weather drama. Prax's geological charts demonstrated just how alive and shifting the planet was, with new crust forming, plates grinding, and volcanoes smoldering. And Lorik wove it all together into a single, cohesive document. Their arrival at the Galactic Records Department was met with the usual bureaucratic routines: docking clearance forms, reentry logs, and inspection of the ship's inventory. The storied Earth expedition had to fill out so many reams of paperwork that it took several full days before they could even schedule a meeting to present their findings. During that time, word leaked through the department's rumor mill that the team had discovered a civilization more tolerant of natural upheaval than anyone believed possible. Whispers circulated about changes to the official definitions. Even in the break rooms where employees sipped nutrient solutions, one could overhear excited talk about that impossible planet called Earth. Eventually, they found themselves standing before a conference table ringed by some of the department's highest authorities. Director Haller presided once again, quivering with tension. Senior data archaeologist Trivex, a multi-limbed specialist in centuries-old record fragments, was present. So was the department's lead lexicographer, whose job it was to ensure that official definitions never left room for ambiguity. The team had only one chance to make their case. Lorik cleared his throat, resisting the urge to produce a stack of disclaimers for each statement. Instead, he guided them through the visual logs of storms in Florida, the swirling chaos of Tornado Alley, footage of earthquakes in California, and data from various historical events. Each scene was accompanied by interviews of humans who greeted these phenomena with mild alarm at best, humor at worst. The highlight was a snippet of a hurricane party, in which people, instead of evacuating in terror, blithely grilled food and shared jokes as fierce winds battered the coast. The room full of bureaucrats watched in stunned silence. Several times, the lexicographer paused the footage to ask, "Are we certain these are the normal inhabitants?" And each time, the investigators confirmed, yes, these were indeed typical humans. In the end, Lorik played the clip of a child asking, "Why do we call a natural disaster if it's just the planet doing its normal thing?" That was the rhetorical moment that sealed the argument. Holler's gelatinous form jiggled with shock, and Trivex set down the stylus he had been using to take notes. The entire table realized that Earth's baseline for what was considered normal was drastically different from that of most other species. If a civilization anticipates fires, floods, quakes, and storms, building them into their cultural and infrastructural fabric, then from their point of view, these events do not exceed their normal functioning. Indeed, they expect them. The debate that followed was enormous, spanning many hours, with subcommittee members stepping in to question the logic. Opponents argued that the department's universal definition of disaster had stood unchallenged for millennia. Supporters countered that if humans never filed official reports, no entries would ever appear in the database. The conclusion was that Earth did indeed experience all manner of severe natural events, but these events did not break humans' sense of normal life. They simply rebuilt, revised building codes, or relocated a few miles inland, treating it all as part of a never-ending cycle of life on a turbulent planet. When the final gavel struck, it was decided that a new classification was needed in the official records. Type R civilizations, resilient civilizations, would describe species whose baseline capacity for adapting to planetary volatility was so high that they rarely, if ever, deemed these events catastrophic enough to submit a formal notice. Under this new category, Earth would be designated as the primary example. The department would keep a note that said, "No official disasters recorded," because the locals consider them normal. It was the first fundamental redefinition in centuries, and it threatened to unravel massive bureaucratic processes built around older definitions. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The next day, the team was granted a rare commendation ceremony, though in typical department fashion, it consisted of a small break room gathering where an official read a statement, followed by polite applause. They were each handed an emblem in that dull shade of brownish green that apparently now signified exemplary service in anomaly resolution. Lorik accepted his quietly, thinking back to the people he had seen on Earth. Those who calmly waited out a hurricane in makeshift shelters, those who built underground bunkers for tornado season, the farmers who turned floodwaters to their advantage, and the city dwellers who shrugged off earthquakes with a stoic grin. They had upended centuries of bureaucratic assumptions simply by existing in a state of constant readiness. Jin, Prax, and TYXX wore similarly thoughtful expressions, as though each of them understood that Earth had taught them something profound. When they handed in the final documentation, a clerk in an adjacent office looked at them curiously. "So does Earth have disasters or not?" the clerk asked, leaning forward. TYXX answered in a soft voice, "It has them, but the humans don't treat them that way." "So officially, no." The clerk, accustomed to crisp, clear definitions, blinked in confusion. "That's complicated." Lorik nodded. "Indeed, that's the lesson. It's complicated." Over the following months, the Earth Report became a minor legend within the department. Some read it as a cautionary tale about ignoring local perspectives. Others saw it as an argument in favor of updating centuries-old definitions. It even spawned a spin-off subcommittee to verify whether other planets in the galactic catalog might also be mislabeled. For the first time, the department recognized that not every civilization shared the same baseline sense of disruption. Perhaps, some whispered, there were other worlds that also lived in harmony with frequent catastrophes. Maybe the department's proud track record of absolute completeness had overlooked the fact that different species might simply adapt in ways unthinkable to rigid bureaucratic minds. Yet for all the fuss, the official entry for Earth in the department's main database remained a clean, blank slate under recorded natural disasters. Clicking on it provided only a footnote referencing type, our classification, and a link to the new Earth dossier. which explained in detail how humans embraced the planet's volatility. That single footnote said more than any 1,000 lines of typical bureaucratic jargon could. In the end, life at headquarters went on. Memos circulated. Forms were filled. Meetings continued about other anomalies in the far reaches of the galaxy. The ripple Earth caused gradually fell into routine as new tasks stole the bureaucrats' attention. A year later, one might see a bored analyst flipping through the Earth file, eyebrows rising in mild curiosity before they moved on to the next item in a very long queue. Meanwhile, somewhere across the vast vacuum of space, Earth itself kept spinning, generating storms, earthquakes, and other forms of planetary mischief. Its human residents, as they had for countless generations, would respond with the same mixture of resilience and humor that baffled off-world observers. Sometimes, Lorik would sit at his desk, remembering that child's question about why they called these events disasters if it was just the planet's normal routine. It made him wonder about his own species' acceptance of universal definitions, the department's own baseline. Perhaps the moral was that adaptation is not universal. It's deeply tied to culture, necessity, and experience. He toyed with the idea of writing a philosophical paper on the subject, but decided against it upon recalling that the department had 17 separate forms specifically required for the proposal of philosophical reconsiderations. Instead, he opened a blank new document, sighed, and started drafting an addendum to the Earth dossier, detailing the profound cultural acceptance of chaos. However, the old habits of bureaucracy die hard. The addendum required references, cross-references, sub-appendices, and at least 100 pages of disclaimers. By the time he got halfway through, Lorik realized he was replicating the same endless labyrinth of data that nearly hid Earth's situation in the first place. He stopped, closed the file, and stared out the window of the Andromeda headquarters, wondering if maybe the humans had it right. Maybe the best approach to unstoppable planetary chaos was simply to live with it, adapt to it, and only call it a true disaster when it surpassed even the wildest thresholds. But that wasn't the kind of thought that sat neatly on a line of form. Outside the department, the galaxy went on as always. News reached them of a far-off star going supernova, of a political uprising in some remote cluster, and of a new wave of baby nebula sightings. The department's internal bulletins mostly returned to their usual dryness, detailing incremental improvements to filing systems. And hidden away in the archives, a new classification, Type R civilizations, expanded as more researchers considered the possibility that Earth was not a complete anomaly. The one who first found the blank Earth record, sometimes dropped by the office that handled Type R cases, half expecting to see more. Perhaps there were worlds of amphibious beings who built entire cities in hurricane-like conditions, or insectoid species that thrived on frequent volcanic eruptions. It sparked a flicker of hope that, somewhere else out there, were more examples of civilizations that did not see certain harsh phenomena as worth the bureaucratic paperwork of a disaster. That possibility held an odd sort of beauty. When asked about her thoughts, Zero would simply shrug and say, "The data is the data, but how we interpret it is up to us." For a department that prided itself on objectivity, that was a radical statement, almost heretical. She still believed in forms, in triple-checked data, in the sacred order of the records. But Earth taught her that sometimes the real story was not in the numbers, but in the mindset that shaped them. The final irony was that, for all the hype and intrigue, Earth's official file remained as silent as ever in the main registry. That grand cosmic joke of a planet continued to spin, with humans calmly riding out storms and trembling soil, refusing to classify them as disasters. And so, from the standpoint of the official database, Earth had none. Perhaps that was the best cosmic joke of all. The planet that endured near-constant trials was, by its inhabitants' own definition, free of truly unmanageable disasters. And the department, with all its committees and subcommittees, had finally acknowledged that a civilization's perspective could trump the universal standard. Just a single footnote in the entire library of cosmic catastrophes read, "Earth, no natural disasters on record. Residents consider them routine. It stood as a quiet reminder that sometimes the largest disruptions exist more in the observer's mind than in the event itself. And so, the galaxy moved on, leaving Earth to its storms, quakes, floods, and fires, all part of a planet's normal day, in a universe that thrived on diversity of definitions as much as it thrived on the existence of life itself. In the grand tapestry of the cosmos, there is always a strict hierarchy, an implicit rule that the first to master advanced propulsion, quantum entanglement, or universal power grids would become the ruling elite. The Orion Alliance stood right at the top of that pile. Their civilization had progressed to such a lofty point that even the most mundane Orion citizen had neural implants allowing them to carry on multiple conversations while drafting complex legal documents, all without breaking sweat. Their starships, forged from materials rumored to be denser than neutron stars, gleamed in the light of 100 suns, each vessel built with the unstated motto, "We can do whatever we want, and who's going to stop us?" For centuries, they had extended a polite but firm stranglehold over the galaxy's lesser species, offering them membership in various councils while siphoning off their resources under the banner of cultural development. The unspoken understanding. The Orion Alliance always came out on top. When humanity first ventured into interstellar territory, they did so with a level of excitement reminiscent of a small-town band invited to perform at a massive, star-studded gala. Their jump-capable craft, ironically named the Intrepid Wanderer, arrived on the edges of what the Orion Alliance referred to as civilized space. It was met with a reception typical of Orion, a small task force of half a dozen warships flanking a single diplomatic cruiser. The warships bristled with weaponry so advanced that lesser species quaked at their mere presence. The diplomatic cruiser, on the other hand, was designed with extravagantly carved hull plating and dazzling arrays of lights that spelled out the Alliance's dominion far more effectively than any greeting. Humanity, blissfully unaware of the standard intimidation protocol, sent out their message of cheerful introduction across open channels. "Hello, we come in peace. We have music, books, movies, and over 10,000 varieties of alcoholic beverages to share. Anyone interested in trying some?" The lead Orion commander, upon hearing this, had to excuse himself to take an extended period of sedation therapy. The official report he filed to the Alliance described humans as absurdly informal and potentially delusional, the sort of species that had no clue how insignificant they were. The rest of the galaxy took notice in varying degrees. Most had either been assimilated or subjugated into the Orion Alliance's vast network of client species. They had their own internal prejudices. Some thought humanity was probably too naive to survive for long, while others secretly rooted for the newcomers. It was always entertaining to see fresh players stumble around the cosmic stage. But the Orion Alliance did not traffic in entertainment. They had a neat, orderly system. Top-tier species, the Orions, enacted rules. Mid-tier client states followed them, and bottom-tier developing species were doled out table scraps in exchange for compliance. Humans, with their dusty old reaction drives and binary computers, were deemed bottom-tier the moment their first starship was analyzed by Orion scans. Still, the Orion Alliance maintained an air of propriety. They invited humanity to the Galactic Council, a body comprised of nearly 50 species, though only a handful had any real influence. Orion, of course, led every important discussion, tabled every critical vote, and manipulated every resource allocation. The rest were observers or rubber stamps. Humanity accepted the invitation with unbridled enthusiasm, broadcasting that they were honored to be recognized among the great powers of the galaxy. Those who understood how Orion worked simply shook their heads in pity, anticipating another slow assimilation into the Alliance's resource pipeline. But humans did not seem to grasp the dynamics, at least not at first glance. The first official meeting humanity attended was a spectacle. The Council Chamber, a massive ring-shaped station orbiting a star in the outer Raxus sector, boasted architecture so ostentatious that entire species spent their lifetimes studying its design. Delegates from every corner of Orion space converged in a chamber that could seat thousands, complete with shining floor panels that displayed drifting holographic star maps. The humans were assigned a single seat behind a column near a waste extraction duct, presumably to minimize their presence. In typical fashion, the Orion High Council members introduced themselves in lofty terms. They described millennia of stewardship, the burdens of leadership, and the need for absolute discipline in a galaxy filled with potential threats. When the humans were finally given the floor at the tail end of a session, only a handful of representatives were actually paying attention. Even so, the human speaker launched into an oddly enthusiastic speech, describing Earth's cultures, its varied cuisines, the many languages, and that infamous mention of thousands of alcohol types. The Orion sub-operator present recorded the address with a look that managed to convey both contempt and confusion. From that day forward, humanity was given the standard, "Welcome to the bottom of the pyramid" treatment. Orion officials began requiring a series of impossible bureaucratic tasks for the humans to complete if they wished to expand beyond their allocated star systems. Frequent inspections were carried out on human ships, which would inevitably be found lacking some obscure safety measure invented by Orion itself. Fines piled up, resource quotas were levied. Contradictory regulations forced human vessels to waste months navigating official channels. Meanwhile, whenever the humans requested arbitration, it was postponed, rescheduled, or lost in the administrative labyrinth. This was how Orion integrated new species, draining them, sowing frustration, and asserting dominance until they capitulated. Yet the humans did not fight back in any dramatic way. Every time something was blocked, they politely asked for mediation. If an asteroid mining operation they'd established suddenly became historically relevant to the Orions, the human diplomats filed official protests. They carefully recorded each instance of sabotage, each blockade, each new labyrinthine code, all while abiding by the established council procedures. This behavior unsettled the Orions more than an open rebellion would have. Their usual pattern was that either the species attempted to fight, in which case the Orions crushed them in a swift show of force, or they capitulated immediately, giving up resources to avoid annihilation. Humanity seemed to be doing neither. They were, in some bizarre sense, playing along. Several low-ranking Orion officers whispered suspicions. Maybe these humans are pulling an elaborate ruse. Their superiors would dismiss it with an arrogant wave. They lack the technology for that kind of cunning. They're simply naive. Time passed in this diplomatic dance. Humans attended every council session with unwavering punctuality. They made conciliatory gestures toward species that had once been proud civilizations, but now lived as client states, paying tribute to Orion. In closed-door dialogues, certain species, like the Arquid, who had a talent for reading emotional biomarkers, detected that the humans were not quite as clueless as they appeared. Nevertheless, no one had the resources or the bravery to challenge Orion openly, so they mostly kept their suspicions to themselves. When the humans established a research station in the Epsilon Theta system, an unremarkable star cluster containing a few interesting exoplanets, the Orion Alliance swiftly labeled it an unauthorized development zone. Without warning, an Orion fleet performed a so-called training exercise that led to the station's destruction. The official Orion statement insisted that the station was a threat to local cosmic stability. 16 human researchers died in the accident. The resulting outcry from Earth was measured but tinged with righteous anger. They wanted a formal investigation, compensation for lives lost, and an agreement to prevent such incidents in the future. Orion refused, deferring all demands to the labyrinth of the Council's legal committees. At the next council gathering, the humans took the floor with more seriousness than usual. There were no jokes about cultural exchange or the wonders of Earth's beverages. Instead, a middle-aged human delegate with weary eyes and a scar running across his cheek read out the list of provocative actions: sabotage at mining sites, blockade of trade routes, destruction of the Epsilon Theta research station, and the repeated denial of due process. Each bullet point hammered home the pattern of aggression. He ended with a simple question: will the Orion Alliance consent to an impartial inquiry and guarantee the safety of future human operations? The Orion envoys' eye stalks twitched in the universal sign of annoyance. They repeated their standard disclaimers about necessary military drills and our historical right to ensure stability. Everyone present knew it was a carefully disguised way of saying, "We do what we want." The human delegate closed his notes. He looked around the chamber, noting how few delegates remained to hear him. Then, with a tone that was calm yet resonant, he said, "Understood. We have our answer." And with that, the entire human delegation silently exited. Some found the moment anticlimactic. Others sensed a shift, an intangible change that made them uneasy. While official council business trudged on, humanity had decided that the diplomatic phase was over. A wave of encrypted communications spread from Earth to its outer colonies, instructing personnel to implement Project Lattice, a multi-layered plan whose details have been carefully hidden behind decades of dull-sounding research budgets and carefully crafted illusions. Civilian freighters rerouted. Mining ships vanished from conflict-prone corridors. Deep space reconnaissance stations, which had masqueraded as weather outposts or geology labs, began pulsing with new energy signatures. On Orion's homeworld, the High Imperator and his council prepared for their annual triumph celebration, an ostentatious event celebrating Orion's centuries of dominance. While they planned fireworks and feasting, mid-level intelligence officers tried to raise concerns about unusual human movements. These concerns were filed away under paranoia because there was no point in acknowledging the possibility that a Category 3 emerging species could pose a threat. The Orions had advanced weaponry that could eviscerate entire star systems, and they had only revealed a fraction of it. What could the humans possibly do? 2 weeks later, the entire galaxy found out. It started with faint anomalies in Orion's frontier systems. Navigation beacons began transmitting garbled data, making Orion ships jump to incorrect coordinates. Defense satellites, those proud juggernauts of Orion's protective grid, started to show random errors in their software. At first, each glitch was shrugged off as an isolated malfunction, but the frequency escalated until entire battalions of ships found themselves locked out of their own flight controls. Then came the simultaneous broadcast across all Orion frequencies. The diplomatic phase has concluded. The educational phase begins. At council stations across the galaxy, screens that had once shown color-coded star charts replaced themselves with a single notice in bright letters: "Stand by for demonstration." In the council chamber, delegates saw footage from Orion's frontier sectors, courtesy of an unknown feed. Battleships that had once dwarfed entire civilizations drifted helplessly, main power offline, engines refusing to respond. One observer from the Salvi Collective coughed in disbelief. The Orions had never suffered such a large-scale network failure, not even in simulated war games. Panic seized Orion command centers. Admirals barked contradictory orders through broken comm lines. Planetary governors demanded immediate assistance. Yet everything that used an Orion-coded operating system was compromised. The final humiliation arrived when the humans quietly took control of several capital ships in orbit around the Orion homeworld, merely by transmitting override codes that exploited embedded vulnerabilities. The Orion Imperator, frantic, demanded an explanation. In response, they received a calm video message from Earth's highest council. "We have studied your methods, your networks, your technology. We have endured your provocations and your lethal meddling. We're no longer interested in playing nice." As if to underscore the point, the stolen Orion battleships angled downward, shimmering above the planet's largest metropolis. For a moment, the entire galaxy seemed certain the humans would unleash a horrific bombardment. Instead, those ships merely hovered, blocking out the sky, broadcasting the same repeating message into the minds of every Orion citizen: "This is not war. This is a lesson. Remember who forced us to teach it." Over the next several hours, systematically and without mass bloodshed, human forces dismantled Orion's interstellar communications array. They targeted the network nodes that coordinated hyperlane traffic and supply lines. Defense grids turned on themselves, forcibly powered down by remote override. Key strongholds were rendered inoperable. Shipyards went silent. The unstoppable Orion juggernaut found itself paralyzed by a species it had written off as technologically backward. Amid the chaos, humans made repeated announcements. Evacuate your military installations. Surrender your weapons. We will not harm civilians. We want no more bloodshed. If there had been any illusions that Orion could recover with some last-ditch superweapon, they vanished when human stealth cruisers decloaked around the Orion homeworld's orbital perimeter, bristling with novel energy fields that even Orion's best sensors could scarcely comprehend. Observers in the council chamber watched live feeds of these human ships, sleek and grim, an antithesis to the gaudy, oversized Orion design. They were smaller in number, but vastly more advanced than any had suspected. The Emperor of the Cyrillin, who had always believed the Orions invincible, nearly fainted at the sight. The entire galaxy experienced in real time the painful truth that the Orions had made a single catastrophic miscalculation. They had assumed being nice meant being weak. In the wake of this unprecedented demonstration, the humans did not declare themselves conquerors. They did not lay claim to Orion territory. Instead, they established a strict perimeter around Orion's core worlds and requested a new session of the Galactic Council to determine how to proceed. Over. Half the Council's delegates, astonished and fearful, immediately complied, though many believed the humans would now install themselves as galactic overlords. The Orions, humiliated, had no choice but to attend. The newly convened council session took place in a hush that had never permeated the station before. The usual Orion delegation, proud, adorned with intricately designed regalia, arrived stripped of their finery. Their primary representative, a figure once renowned for delivering grand speeches about Orion's manifest destiny, now stood silent at a small podium. Across from him, the human representatives waited, their expression neutral. Every single species in the chamber watched with rapt attention. Even those that used to find council proceedings tedious and bland realized the magnitude of this moment. The Orion representative started with the usual official line. References to unfortunate misunderstandings, technical malfunctions, possible oversights. He tried to claim the Epsilon Theta incident was an anomaly that the Orion leadership would have investigated thoroughly had the humans only exercised more patience. A smattering of snorts echoed from delegates who knew better. The Orion, lacking the confidence of old, finally bowed his head. We request a discussion about how to move forward. The lead human speaker stepped up. He was the same delegate who had once stood behind a support column, overshadowed by Orion's pomp. His voice, amplified for the entire chamber, was calm but unyielding. We came into this galaxy with an open hand. We offered cooperation, a willingness to follow protocols we believed were fair. Time and again, we were met with ridicule, sabotage, or direct aggression. We have lost lives, we have lost resources, and we have lost faith in the system you set up. The hush deepened. Yet we have no intention of wiping you out or doing to you what you did to others. We have seen enough cruelty in our own history to know it solves nothing. So we give you a choice. Surrender your offensive fleets, disband your planetary blockade networks, repay what you have unfairly extracted from weaker species, and commit to a restructured council where no single group holds absolute sway. Or discover precisely how much more we are capable of. Witnessing a reversal of cosmic power so thorough and so swift, delegates from the smaller client states of Orion felt a sudden surge of hope. They had spent generations supplying raw materials and labor to Orion's unstoppable war machine. They had watched their own cultural identities stripped away under the guise of Orion's stewardship. Now that same war machine lay inert, undone by a species that had arrived in swim trunks and novelty hats, so to speak. The Orion representative, trembling with residual pride, tried to salvage some dignity. Our people still have pride, still have technology. The human turned to him, eyes steady. You do. And that technology served you well for centuries. But now you face technology that has no interest in trophies or intimidation. Ours is designed for one purpose: to ensure that we never again have to suffer at the hands of tyrants. The Orion found no comeback to that. The session lasted days. Humans produced endless data logs and testimonies, evidence of systematic oppression that Orion had inflicted on countless species. Delegates from those species bravely stepped forward to confirm the details. Evidence from older archives revealed how Orion had historically manipulated the Council to maintain a facade of democracy while controlling trade routes. As the days wore on, the tone shifted from raw fear of the humans to a subdued gratitude that someone had finally broken Orion's monopoly. The humans continued to emphasize they did not seek an empire. They wanted a system of accountability with genuine checks and balances. They demanded Orion pay reparations to those whose worlds had been plundered. No longer would new species be relegated to the behind-the-columns seat just because they lacked advanced propulsion technology. Still, not everyone believed the humans were truly benevolent. Some delegates recalled historical patterns in which a new power replaces an old tyrant, only to become tyrannical themselves. The Grenshaw ambassador asked outright, "How do we know you won't become worse than Orion once you taste the spoils of controlling the galaxy?" The human spokesperson, a woman wearing what some recognized as Earth military regalia, smiled without warmth. "Because we have no interest in controlling the galaxy, only in defending ourselves and those who believe in fair cooperation. Being nice was never about weakness. It was a choice we made as a species to ensure mutual survival. We prefer that choice. But if forced, we have other choices, as you have seen. Any species can do unimaginable harm when cornered. Humans have had millennia of practice cornering one another on our own planet. We would rather not do that again on a galactic scale." The new arrangement hammered out in the council chambers was cautious and unprecedented. Orion would maintain its sovereignty, but under strict limitations on its military expansions. All client states were to be given independence, with their own representation in a reorganized galactic assembly. Humans and Orions jointly chaired a transitional oversight committee, tasked with ensuring resources were allocated fairly and no species leveraged disproportionate power. The humans insisted upon rotating leadership roles among multiple civilizations, guaranteeing no single group could revert to tyranny. Observers whispered that it was remarkable the humans had not demanded Orion's unconditional surrender or the annexation of Orion star systems. But the humans consistently repeated that they had no interest in empire building. Meanwhile, on Orion's homeworld, the general populace swung between resentment and relief. They had lived under the assumption of permanent superiority, told from birth that they were chosen to guide lesser species. Now, confronted with the reality of their vulnerability, a portion of their society felt humiliated. Another portion seemed almost grateful that the humans had ended their regime's militant policies without obliterating them. Journalists, newly freed from the regime's censorship, began reporting on the centuries of hidden abuses, unveiling the cost of Orion's galactic management. They discovered that in many instances, Orion's expansions had led to cultural erasure on distant worlds. The more they learned, the more some Orions realized how twisted their system had become. In Earth's own sphere, people were torn between celebrating their astonishing victory and mourning the losses that had led them there. The families of those 16 researchers from Epsilon Theta still bore fresh grief. Their images, displayed in a memorial broadcast, drove home the point that it took these sacrifices for humanity to say enough. Quietly, the older generation on Earth drew parallels to humanity's own history, where powers had risen and fallen, and how global wars had taught them the devastating cost of unchecked ambition. Now they had played out a similar conflict on a galactic stage, and somehow, paradoxically, had done so with remarkable restraint. As a final gesture, the humans convened a smaller meeting with Orion leadership on the very same station that had once hosted lavish Orion celebrations. No pomp, no fireworks, just a single large chamber with representatives from both sides. The conversation started stiffly, with Orion leaders uncertain how to negotiate from such a disadvantage. But the humans led with a surprising sincerity. They acknowledged Orion's achievements in technology and culture, pointing out that if Orion had not been so obsessed with domination, they might have peacefully guided the galaxy toward a golden age of collaborative discovery. They expressed genuine regret that so much potential was wasted on fueling Orion's war machine. One human official even joked that we might have traded you 100 new forms of music for a single jump engine improvement, highlighting how both sides lost opportunities during their protracted standoff. Eventually, Orion's new Provisional Council signed a framework agreement. The official name, Galactic Cooperation Compact, was a mouthful, but it signaled a shift away from the old hierarchical systems. A newly minted council, with seats distributed proportionally to population and technological standing, took shape. Each representative, no matter how advanced their species, was subject to oversight measures preventing them from accumulating tyrannical power. Enforcement fell jointly to a coalition of species, including humans and Orions, ironically placing them side by side as co-guardians of a new order. Some in the galaxy doubted such an arrangement would last. Could old grudges vanish in the span of a few signatures? Nonetheless, for the first time in centuries, the Orion Alliance was not in absolute control. For the first time ever, humans had proven themselves far more formidable than they appeared. And for the first time, a collective hope spread among smaller civilizations that perhaps they could have a say in their own futures without fear of Orion battleships arriving to keep the peace. In the days following the signing, rumors flew through the galaxy that humans had at least a dozen more surprise weapons hidden away, or that they had discovered some quantum anomaly that neutralized any technology reliant on standard subspace frequencies. Humans never confirmed nor denied such rumors. Some suggested that humans had borrowed from their own brutal history: world wars, centuries of espionage, an arms race that once threatened to destroy their own planet. Maybe they had simply adapted those old experiences for an interstellar theater. Whatever the truth, the message was unmistakable. Humans were nice, until they weren't. Back on Earth, celebrations were muted rather than triumphant. Citizens felt relief that they had safeguarded their colonies and upheld their dignity in the face of Orion aggression. Yet the cost weighed on them. News channels held respectful memorials for the fallen researchers and freighter crews lost in Orion's earlier accidents. A newly formed interstellar diplomatic corps hammered out details to ensure other developing species entering the new council would not endure what humanity had. The slogan, "Never Again," circulated among the population, echoing the same vow older civilizations had made after their darkest chapters. For months later, the council reconvened. Delegates filled the station's central chamber, once a palace built for Orion's self-congratulation, now rebranded as a forum for shared governance. The human contingent arrived dressed in formal Earth attire, while the Orion delegation sported simpler garments than they'd worn in the past. The tension that had hung over previous sessions softened. Procedural items, from resource allocations to dispute resolutions, were discussed in a more balanced manner. Smaller species queued up to present their needs without the old fear that Orion would label them unimportant. In a closing session, the newly appointed Orion representative, a younger official who had advocated for cooperation, stood up and addressed the chamber. He acknowledged the crimes of Orion's older regime, asked for patience as they reformed, and ended with an unexpectedly hopeful sentiment. Perhaps one day, we will truly earn the right to call ourselves guardians of this galaxy, not through force, but through integrity. It was a humble statement that no Orion of the previous era would have been caught dead uttering. Polite applause followed, but it was the type of moment that signaled a genuine cultural shift. From across the room, the lead human delegate rose. Silence fell almost immediately. Everyone had seen how swiftly humans could bring a warmonger to its knees, so their words carried immeasurable weight. We accept your commitment to reform, and we pledge to work alongside you. We are not perfect. We have our own history of mistakes and aggression. But if there is one thing we have learned, it is that mutual respect and fairness can accomplish more than subjugation ever could. We are prepared to stand with any species that values that principle, and stand against any who seek to trample it. At that moment, a broadcast from Earth interrupted with a snippet of music, some old jazz tune that the engineer in the control booth had cued by accident. A gentle melody filled the air. Delegates who were unaccustomed to Earth's cultural artifacts listened in mild confusion, but the humans allowed it to play. The final notes lingered in the chamber, an odd echo of relief and reflection. Then the station's main lights dimmed, signifying the official conclusion of the council session. Delegates filed out, many sporting expressions of cautious optimism. In the weeks that followed, the humans and Orions conducted joint missions to the former client worlds that Orion had once governed with a harsh hand. They oversaw the decommissioning of enormous war factories, transforming them into commercial hubs or research stations that genuinely served the local populace. Humans introduced some of Earth's scientific breakthroughs for the betterment of environmental conditions on worlds ravaged by Orion's exploitative mining practices. They helped design re-education programs to dispel Orion's centuries of propaganda, focusing on building a more equitable future. Throughout these efforts, the phrase "done being nice" became legendary. The battered Orion destroyers that drifted above the homeworld still served as a silent reminder of that day. Some proposed dismantling them altogether, but the humans insisted on leaving a few intact as floating museums to show what could happen to any would-be oppressor who tried to disregard diplomacy and basic decency. Tourists from across the galaxy flocked to see these behemoths, now inert monuments to an empire's hubris. A Karathi journalist, known for her sharp wit, wrote a widely circulated commentary. "We once thought the Orions would rule us forever. Then came a species that introduced itself with offers of beverages and music. They were disrespected, marginalized, threatened, even killed. But they observed, calculated, and when pushed too far, they destroyed an empire's arrogance with fewer casualties than a minor border skirmish. They taught us that kindness is not an admission of weakness. It is a virtue we choose, and we must never forget that one can choose otherwise if forced by circumstances." If there was any lingering doubt about humanity's true power, it vanished in the following months. The brand new council recognized Earth as a premier technological force, granting them a permanent seat. On the Oversight Committee, the humans accepted it, but with a condition: any advanced technology they developed would also be shared under certain guidelines to prevent the formation of another Orion-like regime. The text that codified this arrangement became known informally as the Accord of Principles, referencing an ancient Earth concept that sometimes a group needed to rely on moral guidelines just as much as raw might. As normalcy settled in, Earth reopened channels for cultural exchange, no longer overshadowed by the threat of Orion retribution. Galaxies near and far discovered an endless stream of human artistry, storytelling, and of course, those thousands of alcoholic varieties that once drew mocking curiosity. Now, they became a symbol of humanity's unpredictable creativity and boundless diversity. Delegates visiting Earth often joked that they were more intimidated by the myriad forms of spicy Earth cuisine than by Earth's dreaded stealth cruisers. Yet behind the lively exchanges and hopeful transformations, a collective memory remained. People recalled the footage of Orion fleets dropping inert from the sky, entire starships turned into puppets by human-coded infiltration. They remembered the calm but chilling timbre of the human president's voice when she declared, "We no longer tolerate your violence." That memory stood as a sentinel, warning anyone who might consider filling Orion's old shoes as galactic tyrant. Humanity had played the role of the polite newcomer once. They would not play it again. As the days turned to years, these lessons shaped the new council. Debates were still heated, differences still arose, but the specter of unilateral conquest had receded. Conflicts were channeled into negotiation tables and joint programs. Those who had predicted humans would inevitably seize power for themselves saw only modest expansions of Earth's sphere, focused on resource balance and cooperative ventures. The galaxy entered an age that might not have been peaceful in the absolute sense. Old rivalries never vanished overnight, but it was at least more stable and less dominated by a single overarching threat. And so, from the perspective of those who had only known Orion subjugation, the day the humans decided they were done being nice became a cornerstone of modern galactic history. It was the moment that shattered an ancient power and replaced it with a fragile but meaningful hope that advanced civilizations might strive for something better than tyranny. Future generations studied it as a turning point, a testament to the power of strategic deception employed for the sake of defense, and a case study in how a seemingly weak newcomer could upend an entire established order if they had enough resolve and enough hidden aces up their sleeves. Children on distant worlds asked their parents, "Is it true the humans can hack an entire star system with a single code sequence?" And parents would respond with caution, "We don't know the exact details, but never test the patience of Earth's people." Merchants told tales of how humans had tricked the mightiest empire by feigning inferiority. Scholars lectured on the dual nature of kindness, how it can be extended willingly, but can also be withdrawn if trampled upon. Philosophers wrote essays reflecting on how a galaxy so large still fell prey to the same mistakes of arrogance and underestimation repeated countless times in smaller scales. On Earth itself, daily life settled back into a familiar pattern, albeit with a new cosmic dimension. Interstellar trade flourished as they imported exotic raw materials and exported earthly goods, from fine art to advanced medical tech. The largest shift was psychological. Earth's leaders knew they had forged a safer environment for their people, but they were wary of falling into the same trap Orion had. Expansion, they reasoned, must come with humility and accountability, or risk repeating the same mistakes that had toppled the Orion Alliance. Earth scientists continued to push boundaries in quantum computing, subspace engineering, and faster-than-light comms. Yet they operated within the framework of the Accord of Principles, mindful of the new responsibilities that came with such knowledge. Still, a sense of watchfulness pervaded the galaxy, as if everyone collectively held their breath to see if the humans would overreach their new station or if some other power might attempt to replicate the old Orion model. But the humans kept their word, helping to strengthen the Council's institutions so that no single faction could monopolize power. Over time, many species grew appreciative of the humans' approach, acknowledging that the sudden and dramatic downfall of Orion, frightening though it was, had ultimately spared the galaxy a drawn-out war. The educational phase, as the humans had called it, was short but emphatic. No one forgot the final message scrawled across Orion's once impregnable warships. It had appeared in every Orion's personal device the moment their systems were breached. You wanted to see what a cornered species can do? We hope this is lesson enough. The phrase lesson enough became a watchword, repeated by those who had been oppressed and those who had once been oppressors. For the first time in the known cosmic timeline, the unstoppable power was not a bullying empire, but a single principle given teeth by unexpected strength. Don't mistake kindness for weakness, or you may push someone to use the strength they've been quietly perfecting all along. That, more than anything, was what every species took away from that day. Even the Orion official archives, once sanitized propaganda, documented the events with surprising honesty. In their revised textbooks, they describe how a so-called developing species overcame the greatest empire in galactic memory without scorching entire worlds. The Orions sought to rebuild their culture on a foundation of respect they had never shown before. Some older Orions resisted the shift, clinging to bitterness and suspicion, but they were gradually marginalized. Younger generations embraced interstellar cooperation, forging new alliances not out of fear, but out of genuine curiosity and mutual benefit. And so life continued. The galaxy moved on, each species grappling with everyday challenges like resource management, cultural preservation, and existential musings about why the universe was so large and whether there were other powers out there beyond Orion or Earth. Yet wherever they traveled, they remembered the humans. They remembered that casual greeting, "We have over 10,000 types of alcohol. Care to try one?" And how it disguised an intelligence and determination that most had failed to anticipate. They remembered the quiet, methodical approach that turned Orion's oppressive regime into a case study in how not to treat a newcomer. And most importantly, they remembered that sometimes the friendliest face hides the fiercest resolve. The day the humans stopped being nice was the day the galaxy realized it had to change or risk another sudden and shocking downfall. This time at the hands of a species unwilling to tolerate the old order any longer. The galaxy, in all its vastness, rarely sees such a swift and near-bloodless toppling of an empire. Poets in distant star systems composed verses about it, calling humanity's move the silent thunder, a blow so loud it shook ancient foundations, yet so quiet in its efficient precision. In the end, the galaxy would come to appreciate that silent thunder, if only because it ushered in an era slightly less defined by oppression. Of course, conflicts would continue to flare, and not every civilization would adhere to the new guidelines. But the existence of humans as guardians, or, as some cynics put it, the polite but ever-watchful arbiters, ensured that no superpower could again assume total dominance. And whenever a minor tyrant did arise, the words echoed anew. Be careful not to push them too far. Remember what happened the day the humans were done being nice.